In the previous sessions, we took a look at collecting samples. Now we're going to take a look at analyzing that sample data. And a tool that we use to do that are called SPC control charts. Now there's various types of SPC control charts. And to go over the basics, we'll start out with the X bar R chart. Now let's take a look at an actual X bar R chart. We see three parts to the X bar R chart. First, at the top, we see a table, and then we see our X bar chart, and then we see our range chart. The R stands for range. And we'll start with the table, and the table has multiple columns, and each column represents a sample. And the date time at the top of the column was the date and time that sample was taken. And then we have our data for our sample, and we'll go into that more in a second. And as we scroll, we can go back in time and see previous samples that we're taking. And as we scroll, the chart data stays in sync with the table data up above. Taking a look at the individual values of the X bar R chart, we see the two measurements here. And from our previous sessions, we know that that is our sample size, and that equals 2. So our first sample value was 10,002. Our next sample was 9,998. The sum is pretty straightforward. We add those two together, we get the 20,000. The X bar is actually pretty straightforward also. We have the 20,000. We divide that by the number of measurements that we have on our sample, and we get the 10,000. So this X bar is really, we can call that our average measurement value. Because we have two samples, we divide the 20,000 by 2 and we get the average. If we had 4 samples, we'd take the 20,000 divided by 4 or what have you and get the values that way. Now the range, that's also pretty straightforward. You take the highest measurement value, subtract the lowest measurement value. And you get the range. So in this case, we have 10,002 minus the 9,998, and we get a range value of 4. And the range is going to represent how far apart our measurement values are. If we're producing very consistently, our measurement values are going to be real close together, and our range is going to be a smaller number. If we're not producing our product very consistently, we're going to see a wide variation of values up here, and our range is going to increase. So that's kind of an indication of how consistent we are within one sample. Now let's take a look at our X bar data down here in the X bar chart. We see the 10,000 here, and we see we're plotted at 10,000. We see our 9,998, and we're plotted there, and so on, all the way back. Now we have this X double bar value. It's not real easy to see, but it's a symbol X double bar. And what that means is we saw the X bar up here, and sometimes that is shown as X bar, which is our average of measurements, right? X double bar is actually our average of our averages of measurements. What we're doing is we're taking all the X bar values. So we take 10,000 plus 9,998 plus 10,001, and we add up all those measurement values or X bar values. And then we divide that by the number of samples we have, and we get our X double bar. So that really is our average of X bar values. Or you can think of it as the average of measurements. But a little more straightforward to think of it as the average of our X bar values. Our range, that's the same thing down here, works the same way. We see the range bar, and when we see the bar, it's the average. So we're taking our range values here, we're adding them all up, dividing it by the number of samples, and we get our average range value. So that's our average of range values. So just at a glimpse here, we're seeing quite a bit of data. We're seeing our X bar values. If we saw those kind of go on a trend that was constantly going up, then we might see wear in a machine, and we're starting to see our hole size get bigger or something like that. Our range, if it's very close to zero, we're producing more consistent product. If it's all over the place, then we're very inconsistent product. So just visually, very rapidly here, you can kind of get an idea of how your process is going.